We are too excited. We have our special guest on that'll be greeting us. And I'll just read you a little bit about her as we want to celebrate and love on her while we have her here. This sis star is shining bright right now. Ajua B. Asamoah. She's the Crown Act champion. She's a national Biden Harris Black Engagement Advisor. She's a social impact strategist. She's a racial equity pusher, political operative, and proud active leader within Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. What an honor to have her in partnership. We're so happy to have her joining us. And on behalf of the Crown Campaign, a grassroots efforts of community members, we thank you, Crown Act champion Adjoa B. Asamoah, for your instrumental role in leading communities across the United States to lead the work behind the passing of the Crown Act. The Crown Campaign is honoring you with the Bold Advocacy Award for your continued efforts in ending discrimination. And without further ado, we are happy to give the floor to our sister, Adjoa B. Asamoah, to greet us.
Thank you so, so much, not just for the kind introduction, but for helping to lift not just me, but the other sisters who are in the movement. It is, when you do this work, it's not something that's always celebrated. And so I truly appreciate when people do recognize all that happened behind the scenes in order to get this movement where it is. So thank you so much, Sora. I truly appreciate that. With that, I will say greetings to sorors, sisters, and supporters. My name is Adjoa B. Asamoah, and as the racial equity champion, like you said, who developed the legislative strategy and leads the work nationwide for the Crown Act movement, it is truly a pleasure to be here. Other sisters who are in alignment with pushing for racial and gender equity. As I am sure you all have discussed prior to me joining, there is a very long-standing history and problematic practice of racial discrimination based on hair in the United States. There have been countless cases where Black people have been discriminated against for wearing natural hair and or protective styles. Including, but of course not limited to, braids and locks and twists and two knots and afros. This prevalent form of discrimination includes being fired. Folks have been passed over for promotions, and they have even had employment offers rescinded. It obviously impacts the upward mobility of individuals and families. And it has been the reason far too many of our children have missed school and have had negative educational experiences. I'm thinking about a dynamic young girl in Louisiana, Faith Finity, who was sent home in tears because she wore beautiful braids that were deemed a violation of school rules. I'm thinking about a brilliant student in Texas, DeAndre Arnold. So he could not participate in his high school graduation ceremony with his friends because of his locks. A display of cultural pride. And I think people worldwide from different walks of life collectively gasped, witnessing a video that went viral of a student athlete in New Jersey who was forced to make a decision that a boy, because we tend to, acknowledge our kids as adults too often, a boy was forced with a decision he should have never had to make. Choosing between having his locks cut and his identity attacked or forfeiting a match he had earned the right to participate in based on talent. The problem, of course, sisters and supporters, warrants a legislative fix. And I am proud to support lawmakers who champion this issue, ranging from, since you mentioned our beloved organization, although I'm here in my personal capacity, Soror, who is an assemblywoman in New York, Tremaine Wright, who was the first person to pass the statewide bill. I'm thinking about Congressman Richmond, who led and Congresswomen Marcia Fudge, Barbara Lee, and Ayanna Pressley, who co-led the historic bill ensuring that it passed in the United States House of Representatives just recently. I was privileged to be able to work with them. I am privileged to be able to work with Senator Cory Booker to ensure that it ultimately passes in the Senate. There is a need to recognize the African aesthetic must be lifted and valued. And we must challenge consistently these narrow standards of beauty that perpetuate the discrimination. This movement for me personally is about shifting both policy and culture, but it is not about judging. So while my hair is natural, while blown out today, I may very well have twists once I'm able to, breathe a little bit easier, I should say, on November 4th after the election. This is not about judgment. This is about celebrating our Blackness, lifting Black women, men, and children nationwide and even internationally. We shouldn't assume that just because someone opts to rock a perm or, straighten their hair, that a processed mind, is the same as a processed head, because it is not. I was with Stacey Abrams, who noted that, like, I rock my hair like this because it's easier for me. But we should definitely not assume or judge our sisters who opt to wear their hair different ways. This is truly about reserving the right to rock our crowns however we see fit. And because I'm sure my little sister, Senator, I should say, Natalie Murdoch is somewhere in here, although I don't see her on the screen right this moment. Since we are talking about the legislative process, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the fact that, again, while I'm here in my personal capacity, I do work as both an impact and political strategist to elect people who will pass a bill like the Crown Act. Demonstrating our electoral power is critically important for our community, ensuring that we are voting for people who will not only value our vote, but also legislate accordingly once they are elected. That is critically important. You see people like a Senator Kamala Harris who, supports the Crown Act in the Senate versus, other people who would not. So I don't want to make this a partisan issue, because it certainly should not be the responsibility of any one race or party to uphold and fight for people's civil rights. But I will acknowledge, however, that the people who are carrying this bill have been Democrats who have reached out to me. And before I pass the mic back to you, I just want to acknowledge, this year, white women nationwide have been and will undoubtedly continue to celebrate 100 years of having the right to vote. But we know that 1920 doesn't mean the same thing for Black women, and the hypocrisy of it all becomes painfully obvious against the backdrop of a pandemic that disproportionately impacts Black and brown women, and quite frankly really underscores the reality of injustice when I think about the fact that we are gathered here in a community with each other, talking about the need to protect, support, and lift Black women. And Breonna Taylor is no longer with us in the physical sense, but her killers actually remain free. It's a reminder that although Black women, being the pragmatic activists and strategists that we were and are, who understood this concept of intersectionality before the term was even coined, we sacrificed in so many ways for a concept of democracy that didn't even include us when conceptualized. So this celebration, of the 19th Amendment doesn't necessarily ring the same bell, if you will, as it does for others. Last year, and I'll be brief, marked the 400th year of our forced removal from our homeland, the continent of Africa. We endured an unconscionable Middle Passage that I call the African Holocaust, We were dehumanized in ways that most people with our sense of history and lived experience understand. And we continue to fight and fight and fight and push forward. We have a lot of work to do, sisters. And I won't make this political because this is about passing a bill, which is policy. And while they go hand in hand, politics and policy are different things, although obviously interconnected and inextricably linked. I want to just say this. We have not a lot of time left before Election Day. And it's important to note that people are voting right now. And this year, unlike years past, is about election season. We need to rally our folks, not just, although of course, including around issues like the Crown Act. We need to rally our folks, reach out to 5 folks, ensure folks understand how to vote, where to vote, prioritizing safety. Again, I'm talking in my personal capacity to ensure that we are electing people who would, in fact, pass a Crown Act. Now, I'll close with this. In the spirit of true inclusion, because it is important for me to not dismiss any Black women's work, I obviously lead the efforts working directly with a number of elected officials to pass the Crown Act. But I have to lift the names of the sisters who I started this with, and that includes my big sister, my sorority sister, Kelly Richardson Lawson, Orlena, Marcy, Melanie. Those are the folks who I started this movement with. And it's important for me to recognize and lift them because I'm oftentimes seen because I'm out there and I'm friends with a number of different elected officials, but there has been a small but mighty crew of sisters who have really been doing this work since day one. Movements don't just happen. Marcy has, worked wonders prior to starting this movement. We certainly did not create the issue of hair discrimination, and I am not the creator of advocacy. Nobody owns that, and there's no pride in ownership when it comes to that. But mainstream media was not talking about this issue prior to, so that is a skill set that I just want to recognize her for, as well as, my sister girl, Melanie, who you see the beautiful images of Black sisters rocking fros and braids and locks and twists. All of that is a concerted effort. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was lifting them, in addition to Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who was the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus at the time when there were new bans on certain hairstyles that the Army was proposing. She was the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus at that time. She drafted a letter in partnership with Congresswoman Barbara Lee, signed by all of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, all of the female members of the Congressional Black Caucus, saying, hey, we're calling out the racial discrimination in making such a decision to try to impose bans on certain hairstyles. So it's important to recognize that even before I called one state member, those 2 members of Congress were really championing this issue. So I recognize the fact that this is a village. We cannot do it alone. I appreciate all that you all have been doing to elevate this issue, to ensure that folks are, in fact, getting involved. It is beyond our civic duty. Elected officials work for us until we decide they don't. And so once you vote for people, it is critically important for us to hold them accountable and ensure that they are passing messages and passing legislation that we want to see passed. Again, white public opinion has informed policy. It is beyond time for us to ensure nationwide that it is in fact Black opinion that also informs public policy. So please stay connected with me in terms of updates as it relates to what I'm doing, what states I'm working on. And I look forward to continuing to work in partnership with Black women nationwide and brothers and children to ensure that the Crown Act, in fact, becomes law across the land. So with that, I will be quiet. And as they say, in the place that I am oftentimes running around, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you so much.